Hi everyone, Olivia here. It's that time of year again as we delve into my favourites that I had the opportunity to see this year. I enjoyed doing this kind of video last year, and as our channel continues to grow, I think this serves as a lovely little way to wrap the year up. If you're not aware, I'm also pretty active on Letterboxd, so any films I haven't had chance to see yet, films that don't quite make this list, which we'll get into soon enough, I promise, I'll likely review them on Letterboxd eventually. If you want to find out about my thoughts on films I've recently seen, feel free to follow me there. I'll add a link in the description below. Before we start on this list, I just wanted to give a shout out to the films I've missed this year. I'm disappointed I hadn't the chance to catch Sean Baker's Honourable. I love Sean Baker, and I'll be making it a priority to catch this film when I can, but sadly there wasn't any screenings in my area. Robert Eggers' Nosferatu also doesn't get its release here in the UK until January, so that could be a possible entry for 2025. There's a few other films I've been dying to see but just haven't had the chance to do so. Sometimes these films struggle to get distribution in the UK, like Ghostlight, Evil Does Not Exist, or The People's Joker. And Vera Drew, please, if you're listening, please bring this to the UK. I'm dying to see it. And sometimes these films are just scheduled for a later release date than other regions, like Flow, All We Imagine As Light, Memoir of a Snail, A Quiet Place Day One, to just run a few titles off the top of my head that I've missed. There's definitely a bunch I've not mentioned here that I still plan on catching up with. I'm going to be keeping an eye out for these films. I'm certainly eager to see them, but sadly, if I haven't seen them, they can't get a spot on this list. Like last year, before we get into my top 10 of 2024, here's my honourable mentions. The films I'll still gladly recommend, but they just missed out on the top spots. 2024 has been a damn good year for movies, so I found this to be a really tough list to put together. There's a fair few here that were on my top spots before, and so they only just marginally missed out on being in my top 10. I hope there's a selection of surprises and new recommendations here that you might want to check out. So, let's get to it. My honourable mentions for the films I've seen this year. Luca Guadagnino has yet to disappoint me, and while I'm still very curious about his Burroughs adaptation Queer, Challengers was instantly enthralling from the get-go, pulsating and sweaty, aided by that gorgeous thumping cinematic house score from Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. A portrayal of tennis as an extension of sex, love, friendship, where conflict on and off the court is a demonstration of competitive admiration and desperation. Challengers is maybe one of the sexiest films this year that surprisingly has very little in terms of graphic imagery. Zendaya, Josh O'Connor and Mike Faist have this wonderfully engaging chemistry that feels so convincing, each one craving for dreams that are just out of reach. This film is just a pure adrenaline rush that oozes in immaculate style. For our next one, Robert Morgan gave us a frightening glimpse into the unreliability of artists pouring blood, sweat and tears into their endeavours with stop motion. A film where passion projects become deadly obsessions, and in the wake of grief, dependency becomes indirection, just waiting to be exploited. Morgan's experience with stop-motion animation makes this whole experience so fleshy, sweaty, probably one of the grubbiest films you'll see all year. The integration between live action and animation here is so damn seamless. Bigger budget animated productions should certainly be taking note. Stop motion is made all the uneasier for any creative souls who dare watch it. A reminder for us to remain grounded and give ourselves distance over our projects before the stories we wish to tell become the source of our delusions. Mati Diop's understated immersive documentary Dahomey is well worth seeking out. Supported by an ethereal score of analogue synths and atmospheric chants created by Dean Blunt and Wally Badarou, Diop's quietly observant camera chronicles the return back to Benin of 26 stolen artifacts out of 7,000 from the Kingdom of Dahomey by French colonisers, sometimes providing a perspective from the internal monologue of one of the artifacts, while also demonstrating an admiration for the nuances in both celebrating the progress in dismantling colonialist consequences, while also recognising how there's still more work to be done. This is an incredibly important subject matter, especially for us in countries where colonisation meant the reaffirmation of monarchical power, as repatriation becomes more necessary now than ever in preserving cultures around the globe affected by colonialist violence. If this subject matter intrigues you, certainly check this one out. Next, we have a neon-soaked, pulsating documentary on the thriving queer nightlife in Chengdu. The Last Year of Darkness is intimate, open, exuberant, and confident in all it shows in this setting of queer party life, a contrasting sanctuary away from wider China's continued oppression of LGBTQ+ people. The film explores the lives of DJs, dancers, musicians, drag artists, and casual passers-by, drifting from night to night, facing relationship struggles, power outages, personal doubts, and the pressures, the stigma from conservative family members. This is a side of queer nightlife I haven't seen depicted in cinema before, and I welcome it wholeheartedly. It's gorgeous, heartfelt, sincere, exciting, and uncomfortable. One scene in particular, where a couple seek a better view of the city from the rooftop, had my heart racing. This is so grounded in a reality we rarely see celebrated in documentaries. I'm just so glad this film exists, and I hope queer communities continue to thrive even when societies are adamant to tear them down. Continuing this string of Mubi-produced documentaries, for those familiar with the fashion world, you may know John Galliano, either for his incredible designs, or for his anti-Semitic, racist drunken outburst in a Parisian cafe. Kevin MacDonald's documentary, High and Low John Galliano, manages to be both a biographical portrait on the controversial designer's rise and fall, before transforming into a fascinating debate on whether it is possible to forgive Galliano's remarks. The film discusses with Galliano himself over his remorse, as well as numerous human rights lawyers, sociologists, and even the people Galliano harassed during his drunken outburst. And these conflicting perspectives explore to what extent somebody can be forgiven, whether it's even our place to forgive John Galliano, or if it should be down to the people his remarks specifically harmed, and also to what extent can someone redeem themselves. I don't want to go into every nuance here. I think this is a documentary that will hook most people pretty swiftly, even if they don't care for fashion. Back to our string of dramatic films, we have a filmmaker who's been reinforcing himself as one of modern cinematic horror's most chilling voices, and with the surprisingly sleeper success of Longlegs, Osgood Perkins has finally broken into the mainstream. Clearly inspired heavily by 1970s thrillers, but smartly avoids becoming derivative, Longlegs feels like the modern equivalent of Silence of the Lambs, Zodiac, Deep Red, and Angst. Nicolas Cage delivers one of his best recent career performances, unhinged, frightening, flamboyant, without ever becoming camp. Maika Monroe exudes pure anxiety, her possibly psychic, ultra-intuition carrying the weight of a past she doesn't quite remember. This is a wonderfully strange mystery full of blood-curdling developments and dense, icy atmosphere, which taps into worries of religious pressure, making for one of the year's most frightening films. Next, we have Dev Patel's directorial debut, which feels like getting spoilt rotten if you're a superfan of South Korean crime thrillers and Hong Kong martial arts classics. Patel's admiration for both is clear as day, but in Monkey Man, Dev Patel includes his own flourishes and socially aware passions for the issues that India has faced for decades. The echoes of partition, mass displacement, prejudice, and the caste system, which still remains intact in areas of the country, reverberates throughout this film. This is a blood-boiled, cracked-knuckle, no-fucks-given vengeance thriller to match the modern landscape of John Wick and The Equalizer, but Patel's passion for social justice via cracked skulls and overthrown oppressors becomes like a national cry. The Hijra is especially powerful, a community of marginalised trans and intersex people who become the backbone to the destruction of corruption and cruelty. Like a portrayal of the voice of anger that has been squashed for so long, Patel's love and empathy for the downtrodden speaks volumes within Monkey Man that it only just managed to miss out on being in my top 10. Our next film is unashamedly lesbian through and through. Queer fury and sexual liberation laces this neo-noir gem. Rose Glass's Love Lies Bleeding is brutal, intense, and finds a hyper-fascination with how queerness seeks a new start away from the fringes of society. This film gets messy, and it's both exciting and harrowing because of it. Kristen Stewart and Katie M. O'Brien are a tantalising force of sexuality and all-out rough. Rose Glass embraces this duo warts and all as they become embroiled in the criminal underbelly of their town. This is probably one of my favourite revenge films of the year. It feels like the anti-Thelma and Louise, and I think many queer lovers are going to adore it to the very end. Next, we have a fantastic romp through a mixture of anti-colonialist commentary, a demand for Northern Irish independence, the necessity for language preservation, the essential need for communal support, all while delivering a bag of earworm punk rap bangers about MDMA and cocaine wrapped in Irish. Kneecap is going to become one of the recent legends of the modern music biopic, partially because it builds its own story out of half-truths and drug-sozzled myth-making. There's elements of reality in the origins of this unconventional rap trio. Listening to Kneecap's music, you can tell there's a clear passion for embracing the Irish language, while challenging the censoring notions of what is acceptable within artistic freedom. But this film becomes more than just a traditional biopic. It's a political dissection of the echoes of British colonialism that remains in Northern Ireland today. A source of inspiration for younger Irish listeners to learn their recent history, and its dripping and tongue-in-cheek razor-sharp wit that is so fast it's going to give you whiplash. Next is an empathetic, heartfelt, intimate reflection on never-ending generational and cultural pressures in late noughties America, facing the often white ignorance regarding Asian American life, while balancing it with the burgeoning adolescence of teen living. Sean Wang's Didi was a beautiful perspective into the growing up experience that is so often underrepresented. With a strong mix of humour, young rage and insecurity, Didi is filmmaker Sean Wang bearing his heart and soul for us to engage with. Joan Chen is phenomenal here, as a mother trying to manage everything, while still dealing with her own pressures from parental figures. And Isaac Wang is captivating as his son, Chris Wang. The confident ease in which he conveys the torrent of internal teen obstacles demonstrates a young tour de force ready to enrapture the audience. Don't miss out on this one. Now, in no particular order, mostly because I'm indecisive and feel the ranking order would probably fluctuate based on my feelings over time, and of course keep in mind these are the films I've had the opportunity of seeing this year, my opinions are mine alone, and feel free to disagree. Here we are. Here's my top 10 films of 2024. First up, we have an immaculate screwball adventure of epic proportions, ramping up its scale, eccentricities, and silliness to such grandiose heights that I never could have predicted it would achieve. Mike Cheslick's Hundreds of Beavers is like a tribute to classic Looney Tunes cartoons, Marx Brothers comedies, and Chaplin's The Gold Rush. A love letter to early cinema, filled with modernist irony that veers closely to that brand of humour you'd expect from Adult Swim. This film is funny in ways I couldn't predict, setting up gags that would pay off numerous times, which then would also set up other gags, building on the initial premise of a joke, with a snowballing effect that collected multiple punchlines. This film is so stacked with comedy, there are gags you'll fail to fully appreciate until your second or third viewing. The fact this film was achieved with such a small budget is even more impressive to me. Hundreds of Beavers intentionally never tries to hide its low-budget approach. Costumes look fake, and its special effects often look jarring. But the way the film fully commits to its premise, often with enough self-awareness to recognise its own budgetary restraints, and still manages to look as damned beautiful as it does, is a feat to adore. Put this on with a few friends and you're bound to have one hell of a time. Up next is possibly one of the most outrageous, audacious, confident films we got all year. Coralie Faja gave us this balls-to-the-wall maximalist destructor of feminist body horror satire, The Substance. A clear critique of the beauty standards and societal misogyny that women are expected to face, especially through the natural process of aging, where our age becomes a source of sexist stigmatization. The Substance demonstrates just how ugly the attitudes are that women face by confronting us with this dystopic dependency on beauty, youthfulness, and the approval of a superficial world. It's less a fear of aging that's being explored here, but more the fear of how others perceive aging, and Faja explores this with an appreciation of dark humour, excessive grotesquerie, and this wonderful sense for intelligent camp. Demi Moore is killing it in this film. This is an absolute career highlight, and not only does she get to deliver the furious, heightened excess of spectacle, but there's a genuine sense of vulnerability and anxiety that Demi Moore portrays here that encapsulates so much of the worry that many women experience regarding whether they adhere to expected beauty standards or not. Margaret Qualley is excellent as the antithesis, the privilege of youthfulness, with no consideration of foresight. Qualley and Moore together truly fuck shit up on a scale that I never expected from a film this year. The ending is bonkers, and I adore it, continually ramping up the chaos until we can't take any more, and then going even further. What an exceptional experience The Substance is. I've seen it a few times now, and it's likely to become an all-time favourite of mine. Some directors, when they come out with a new film, it always feels like a cinematic event, an obligation to catch on the big screen. Denis Villeneuve's second chapter of Dune feels just like that. An adaptation of a previously deemed unfilmable novel, Denis retains many of the novel's greatest dramatic developments, the splendour of the action-packed spectacle, and with his own slight detours that makes this adaptation a film only Villeneuve could make. Developing the relationship between Paul Atreides, Chani, and the Fremen, Chapter 2 gives us a journey into a young leader-to-be who steps into a powerful role intent on disposing of the oppressive Harkonnen, and yet underlying are the consequences of corruptibility that all ruling power brings. Keeping hold of Frank Herbert's criticisms of monarchical hierarchy and dictatorship, Villeneuve's adaptation cements itself as one of the great literary adaptations of our time, led by a brilliantly understated performance by Timothée Chalamet, a nuanced performance of challenged loyalties by Zendaya, and one hell of a climax that could become the stuff of blockbuster legend, like the Battle of Helm's Deep in The Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers. Our next film could have been a simple road trip movie between friends, but it's something much more within Will and Harper. Harper Steele and Will Ferrell go way back with their time collaborating on Saturday Night Live, and when Harper comes out as a trans woman, the two agree to a trip across the states, where Harper once felt comfortable, but now realises that as much as she loves her country, the country doesn't quite love her back. Will and Harper could have easily been a film of many miseries. It certainly doesn't shy away from the rising transphobia and fear-mongering of anti-LGBTQ+ rhetoric in America, but this is a film of many gentle kindnesses that showcases the depth of Will and Harper's friendship. This is not simply a film that serves as a teaching moment for Will Ferrell's cis-normative perspective on the struggles of transness, although learning moments are handled with great sensitivity and profundity, and I think many cis allies will find this to be beneficial for their own learning experience too. But this documentary is a demonstration of the transcendental nature of friendship. Will bears his soul to Harper, and Harper bears hers to Will. These two are friends to the very end, and it becomes a great source of inspiration, punctuated by moments when Will learns he overstepped a boundary of Harper's, or when Harper opens up about the depths of her dysphoria. Will and Harper is touching, it's hilarious, and it's poignant on a level that I believe many trans people, and the people who love them, will likely shed tears of joy. What an incredible film that is so damn important in this time of growing hatred. Now I know this next one has been a polarising film, but I'm a sucker for films like this. If it's had a mixed response, I'm gonna be more intrigued. Yorgos Lanthimos spoilt us rotten with Poor Things, and now, so soon after, Kinds of Kindness is our punishment. An anthology of sorts which returns the director back to his stripped down and scathing approach of earlier films like Dogtooth. Kinds of Kindness is cold, methodical, precise, and alienating. We get no explanation for each chapter, and that already will understandably frustrate people. You'll never know who RMF is, but that frustration is essential here. As I said, this film is a punishment. Each story focuses on dependency and reliance, as well as the awful consequences which could stem from this. It's like receiving free postmodern fables on harsh life lessons we probably don't wish to accept. And what a fantastic cast this film has too. Margaret Qualley, Mamadou Ache, Hong Chow, Willem Dafoe, Jesse Plemons, and of course Emma Stone. an impressive set of actors who are challenged to play a vast range of characters with drastically differing personalities. There's no two characters alike. It's difficult to summarise this film in just a few paragraphs. There's paranoia, desperation, and so the first tale may even be a deal made with the devil. But if you're somebody who enjoyed the crueler side of Yorgos Lanthimos' films, then Kinds of Kindness is well worth seeking out. My next film, George Miller's follow-up to Fury Road, an elaborate prequel of epic proportions, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, was one of my favourite blockbusters of the year. The scale of this beast is gargantuan, building an interweaving story across chapters spanning possible decades, with a gigantic cast of characters, focusing on the toppling of a crazed, charismatic leader who seems to only understand how to destroy everything he claims. It feels like a Russian novel brought to the distant future wastelands of Australia, where ulterior motives are hidden behind layered plans for betrayal and usurping figurative thrones. Anya Taylor-Joy is a fierce presence as the titular and tragic heroine, Furiosa, a young woman who says very little but demands our attention. Chris Hemsworth proves he's more than just a superhero performer, as his character, Dementus, is comically unhinged, albeit hiding a bleak core which motivates his tyranny. George Miller spoils us with a clash of practical stunt work and medieval treachery, demonstrating that action cinema can embrace literary roots. It's a shame this film didn't do so well at the box office, because it feels like a near-perfect example of the feminist vengeance saga that I'd love to see more of. Our next film begins as an understated essay of gathered classic cinematic footage which depicts witchcraft, aided by the director's curiosity and admiration for witches, eventually develops into an open-hearted, empathetic, and honest documentary on the necessity for dismantling stigmatization surrounding mental health struggles, especially for women who are often dismissed, undermined, or ignored when their concerns are expressed. Elizabeth Sankey's Witches explores her own personal experience of perinatal psychosis, as she was hospitalised after the birth of her son, and from this recollection stems the experiences of other women who recovered, opening up about their depression, anxiety and psychosis, as well as respectfully acknowledging the women who tragically didn't survive. With a mix of essayist narration and interviews with mental health professionals, friends made along the way, and the women who strive to provide solidarity and support when resources are limited in the UK, Witches becomes this beautiful, powerful testament to the women maligned as outsiders who don't follow subservience or traditional beauty standards. The women who understand themselves better than others and become chastised for it. Elizabeth Sankey punctuates this necessity for women's solidarity by describing us all as witches in need of our coven, and as a trans woman, although not a mother, I know that due to my own experiences with anxiety and depression, that Sankey's words, and the words of her interviewees, resonated deeply within me. This might be one of the best feminist films of the year. Now, somehow I managed to see this without knowing much about the story, as I never had the opportunity to catch the stage show. Of course, I heard of its success, I knew it was an alternative prequel of sorts, and I know I definitely heard some of the songs beforehand too. From that description alone, I think you know what this is. Of course, it's Wicked, and what a bewitching delight this film is. Initially I felt hesitant as the trailers hadn't gripped me, but finally watching it was warmth for the soul. Vibrant, colourful, full of life and resplendence, packed with gorgeous costume design work, where no space within the frame is left unused, filled with intricate choreography. John M. Chu seems to be the director for the job in creating these wondrous maximalist productions, although I'm still waiting patiently for a Crazy Rich Asians sequel. Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande are perfect here. Their chemistry explodes with humour, heart, and emotional expression, even when they're battling through arguments of passive aggression. Erivo belts it out with that glorious singing voice of hers that delves into internalised pain, suffering with discrimination, a character undermined within her own story, and Ariana Grande displays that pop princess range with exceptional ease, while also demonstrating a natural strength for comic timing, and a surprising character complexity that made her all the more gripping to watch, torn between friendship and privilege. This is before we even consider that Wicked manages to depict the political scapegoating of marginalised, vulnerable groups, the entitlement of privilege and popularity, the deeply ingrained acceptance of normalised racism, and the manipulative consequences of power. This is a blockbuster that feels so fully fleshed out, and it's only one part of the story. I'm now desperate for a second part. I'm planning to watch it as soon as possible. Now, for this next one, I'm not sure if a film has floored me as hard this year as Jane Schonbrun's I Saw the TV Glow. A burgeoning friendship grows between two outsiders over their fondness for a strange young adult mystery show called The Pink Opaque. But over the years, one friend disappears, and the other struggles to come to terms with what their existence means. This is a beautifully ethereal experience akin to David Lynch's identity-shifting Lost Highway, with touches of the musical performances from Twin Peaks The Return. But I Saw the TV Glow never feels derivative. This feels like it's truly Jane Schonbrun. Their own lived experiences as a trans non-binary person are brought to the screen, retaining all the distress, dysphoria and heartache of a soul who has faced many internal battles about one's own gender identity. I don't think I've seen a film that captures the agony of trans existence so painfully before. This struggle of accepting oneself, the challenges of coming to terms with who you truly are, and the devastation of not knowing when to reveal this side of yourself, or if one can even reveal this side of yourself safely, when the wider world is so unaccepting of outsiders. Justice Smith is an actor to watch out for. Maybe you recognise him from Detective Pikachu or Dungeons & Dragons Honour Among Thieves, but here, Justice expresses such quiet sorrow that becomes emotionally wounding to experience. Bridget Lundy-Payne is fabulous, this alluring enigma who is both a mysterious presence beyond her years and also a guiding light of hope beyond the circumstances that restricts us from being ourselves. I cried twice watching this film. As a trans woman, this film captures the essence of how I felt before coming out, and it's such a dark place to be, but it's also reassuring and cathartic to see it expressed so sublimely for the screen. If you're an egg, there is still time. Finally, we have a touching, earnest and understated drama about the difficulties in seeking a second chance, and the barriers we face in confronting repressed guilt. Levan Akin's Crossing is one of those films that will stay with me for life. As a retired teacher promised her deceased sister that she will find her estranged niece in Istanbul, her niece escaping to the city due to the lack of acceptance she received for coming out as trans. Crossing becomes this immaculate journey of self-reflection, personal hindsight, remorse, and the continuation of hope that motivates our perseverance to keep going just that one extra day in our own life searches. Levan Akin's film demonstrates a gorgeous empathy for trans solidarity in areas of the world where queer rights are undermined, that in the face of an unaccepting world, queer souls can still find their sanctuaries. Crossing avoids the expectation of queer tragedy, and instead opts for a grounded optimism that cherishes the endurance of people trying to improve themselves over past mistakes. It is a deeply understanding film about the necessity for acceptance, recognising that as the world grows more diverse, so should our empathy for people. This is another film that made me cry, but it also felt like a reminder of my own aspirations, and why I strive for them. This is a kind-natured drama that feels like it hopes for the best outcome for those willing to grow in their search for what they're looking for. And that was my top 10 of 2024. Yay! Before wrapping up, I just want to give a brief mention to some of the films I'm excited for in the new year. Here in the UK, we don't get Nosferatu until January, and Robert Eggers hasn't let me down just yet. Bong Joon-ho's Mickey 17 also looks fantastic, Robert Pattinson proving to be a solid casting choice for offbeat stories. Yorgos Lanthimos has kept busy once again, as Begonia is planned for next year too. Knives Out 3 Wake Up Dead Man is going to be exciting to finally see, and I'm just glad Rian Johnson has returned to his playfully eccentric noir roots. Ryan Coogler's reunion with Michael B. Jordan's Sinners, that sounds very promising too. And I'm not going to kid myself, I'm pretty damn curious about Avatar 3 as well. I have a soft spot for these films, I don't know what to say. I know there's plenty of films to come in the new year. These are just some of the titles from the top of my head while I was writing this, but I suppose this time next year we'll see what really sticks out. Thank you for watching. A special thank you to my incredible tier Patreon supporter Gil, and my super tier Patreon supporters Konstantin Bombelli and Jamie.